Hey everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Kentucky Derby series. One Derby prep on tap this weekend that is taking place down at the fairgrounds. It is the Grade 3 Lecomte Stakes, the first 2023 prep at the fairgrounds on their road to the Kentucky Derby, which will culminate in the Louisiana Derby in a couple months' time. And these 8 runners in Lecomte will be hoping to get to that Louisiana Derby in a couple months. Let's take a look at this field of 8 runners, and the number 7 Instant Coffee, I would think, is going to be the morning line favorite for this race. He is one of 2 in here for the Brad Cox stable. Cox also sends out the number 5, Tappett's Conquest, a runner that is stepping up off a maiden victory last time, though Tappett's Conquest also entered in an allowance race earlier on this fairgrounds program, so it'll be interesting to see if he runs in this field. But it's a pretty wide open group. You can make a case for just about every runner in this race, and we're going to go through the entire field of contenders. Before we get to the individual runners, though, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race. And no characterization as to a fast or slow pace, but you do see the number 1 Echo again shown on a clear early lead, and I imagine he'll likely be out there trying for the front end, as he has shown speed in all of his prior starts. The number 3 Bromley, a runner that's stretching out from sprint races, could also show some early speed, and some others have shown speed in their 2-turn races, like the number 4 Confidence Game and the number 8 Two Fills. And the only really confirmed deep closer in this race would be the number 2 Dennington. He's shown towards the back of the pack. That likely favorite Instant Coffee, another one that doesn't have that much early speed, but could be a little bit more tactical than Dennington, who's shown towards the back of the pack. Before we move on to the contenders, let's take a look at one of the new features in TimeformUS, that is the finish projector. You can find this in your DRF mobile PPs by clicking on that TimeformUS tab, and the finish projector basically is a visual representation of the TimeformUS power picks that you might be familiar with from the current version of TimeformUS. And the algorithm is picking the number 1 Echo again, who you can see winning the race here over the number 7 Instant Coffee, that likely favorite. Not a big surprise when we see the TimeformUS speed figures for this race, as Echo again is coming off the best last out speed figure. But I think the big question for him is going to be the distance. And let's get into the main contenders. We'll go through this field in post position order. So we'll begin with the number 1 Echo again, and we'll take a look at his last race when he recently finished 3rd in the Springboard Mile at Remington Park. And he set the pace this day, as the pace projector predicts he might do in this Lecomte Stakes, but he got challenged on the inside at the top of the stretch by the eventual winner, who slipped through in that rail path. And Echo again couldn't really match that one's challenge, ends up fading to 3rd in this race. A solid speed figure. He got a 110 TimeformUS speed figure for this effort, and that is the best last out number in this field. I'll be interested to see if the runners coming out of the Springboard Mile can confirm that number, because we've seen the Springboard Mile get pretty big speed figures in the past. It hasn't always been the most productive Kentucky Derby prep race. We've seen a couple of runbacks already out of the race from last December this year, and they have not quite run back to that number so far, but they were horses that finished farther back in the pack. My big question for Echo again is the mile and the 16th distance for this race. He did not handle it when he tried it in the Iroquois last year as a 2-year-old, though he did set a fast pace that day. He was so impressive winning his debut, going the 6.5 furlong distance at Saratoga. I do wonder if he may ultimately prove to be a better 1-turn horse or a sprint type, but they're going to try this Derby prep going the 2-turn mile and a 16th distance here. The runner just to his outside, the number 2 Dennington, has the opposite running style, as he likes to launch from towards the back of the pack. We'll take a look at his last race when he was recently 3rd in the Smarty Jones Stakes at Oaklawn Park, and that is him, the gray horse that's trying to run up into 3rd through the short stretch here. He was really no match for the winner of this race, Victory Formation, who was much the best. He is an undefeated Brad Cox trainee. Dennington, though, is running into another couple of Brad Cox trainees in this race that might be pretty talented, and he's just going to have to step it up from a speed figure standpoint. He has yet to break a triple-digit TimeformUS speed figure, and he was not quite good enough to beat Instant Coffee 2 back in that Kentucky Jockey Club, though the pace of that race might have worked against him, as you can see all of those blue color-coded TimeformUS speed figures. Hoping they go pretty quickly up front, and the one feather he does have in his cap is he has plenty of 2-turn experience, and Ken McPeak is putting the blinkers on this time to try to elicit a little bit more early speed for him, but he is going to have to run a faster race. to be a contender here. Just to his outside is the number 3 Bromley. We'll take a look at his PPs in TimeformUS, and just a couple of starts so far for this Paulo Lobo trainee, but he's won both of them, including his debut on the dirt at Churchill Downs. He was pretty game to get the job done that day, despite racing a little bit greenly through the stretch. We saw him again be a little bit green in his second start over the Tapeta surface at Turfway, but he did grind it out that day once again. Both of those races over sprint distances, so he'll be stretching out an extra 2 furlongs to try this two-turn route for the first time. There is some pedigree for him to handle it on the top side, being by mastery. The dam side of his pedigree is maybe a little bit more geared towards turf and one-turn distances, so we'll see if he's going to get this two-turn mile in the 16th, but he's definitely one that has some promise, and we've seen Paulo Lobo do pretty well across the board with all types of runners over the past year or so, so he's one that I could see some people making a case for in this Lecomte. The number 4, Confidence Game, is another runner, kind of like Dennington, who has plenty of two-turn experience coming into this race. He's gone a mile in the 16th around the two turns 3 times in a row coming into this, and he's actually coming off a victory going that distance last time out in an optional claiming race at Churchill Downs. They tried out some new tactics that day, getting aggressive, sending him to the lead. It remains to be seen if he's going to be quick enough to attain that same forward position in this race with other speeds like Echo Again and Bromley signed on here. The Confidence Game did respond very well to getting to the front end last time, battling back once he was challenged in the stretch to win that race. Got a solid 104 TimeformUS speed figure for that performance, which stacks up pretty well against the rest of this field. And do note, that was on the same night that they ran the Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill Downs, and this race went much faster than the Kentucky Jockey Club, though we'll talk a little bit about how the pace might have influenced the final time of the Instant Coffee's Kentucky Jockey Club. Confidence Game, definitely one that's to get better with added distance. His dam is actually a half-sister to Zenyatta, so this one really is bred to run all day, but going to have to take another step forward potentially to beat this field, though his trainer Keith DeSormo did upset this race last year with a big price, Call Me Midnight, so he'll be trying to pull off the same feat here with Confidence Game. The first of the Brad Cox trainees that we'll get to is the number 5, Tappett's Conquest. And like I said, this one is cross-entered in an allowance race earlier on this Fairgrounds program on Saturday. So we'll see if they decide to run here or in that softer spot earlier in the day. But Tappett's Conquest has shown some promise in his first couple of starts. I thought he showed a lot of likable attributes in his debut at Saratoga when he was pretty far back moving out of the chute down the backstretch, but made a big middle move down the backstretch to get into contention around the far turn. Traveled well in the pocket before challenging the eventual winner, Powerful, in the stretch, and he showed no problems handling the stretch out in distance last time in that mile in the 16th maiden race at Churchill Downs. Not a big surprise, being that he is a son of Tappet. He is supposed to get better with added ground. Likely to have to improve to beat this field since he's just earned a 95 TimeformUS speed figure so far as his top, but I do think there is plenty of upside still with this Brad Cox trainee, and coming off the slight layoff here, I do think he's one that you have to consider. Number 6, Itzos, is a horse that is also coming out of the Paulo Lobo stable. We already talked about his stablemate Bromley, and this runner is also sent out by OXO Equine and cost a lot of money as a yearling. They paid $1.4 million for this horse, and no surprise when you look at the pedigree, he is the younger half-brother to the horse of the year, Rachel Alexandra. Hasn't quite run up to that pedigree just yet, as you can see, at 86 TimeformUS speed figure. Not quite going to get it done here, and he did earn that number, breaking his maiden last time over the Tapeta surface at Turfway Park. So he still has to prove that he can handle the dirt, something that he didn't do so well in his career debut at Churchill Downs. But at the very least, he's likely to be a pace presence in this race. Even though he wasn't shown that close up on the pace projector, he has been contesting the paces in both of his sprint starts so far. So you would imagine stretching out to this mile in the 16th distance, the game plan is going to be to get this horse forward in the early going. So maybe just another reason why this pace could heat up on the front end. And if that does happen, I think it would work to the favor of the number 7 Instant Coffee, who we'll talk about next. This is the other Brad Cox trainee in the race, and really the primary runner for this barn, as he is likely to go favored in this spot. And I really liked his performance last time out in that Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill Downs. Like I said, the final time of that race was not that fast. The 88 final time number that you see in the TimeformUS PP is kind of indicative of that. But you see that P notation next to the race rating box by the 101 on the left left-hand side, that indicates that the TimeformUS speed figure maker, Craig Wilkowski, he made the decision to break this race out due to pace from the other routes that were surrounding it, because they just went so slowly in the early portion of this race. It really didn't give any of the runners in this field the opportunity to run the kind of faster speed figure that you might have expected from this field. And you can see that in those blue color coded TimeformUS pace figures across Instant Coffee's running line for the last race. So the 97 TimeformUS speed figure, I think it makes sense for that field, but he had already run some faster numbers in his prior starts, such as when he was fourth in that Breeders' Futurity, getting a 104 behind some very good rivals like likely 2-year-old champion Forte, as well as the very promising Loggins from his same stable. So we've already seen that Instant Coffee has plenty of talent. I like that he was able to close into the slow pace last time, and he's likely to get a much quicker pace on the front end here. As we've already talked about, a lot of the runners drawn to his inside do want to be forward heading into that clubhouse turn, and I think that would work in Instant Coffee's favor. So I do view him as very much the horse to beat in this Lecomte. One more runner to talk about is the number 8, Two Phils, the one horse drawn to the outside of the number 7, Instant Coffee. And he also competed in that Breeders' Futurity where Instant Coffee was fourth. That was 2 races back for him. He finished over 10 lengths behind that presumptive champion Forte. But I liked the performance that Two Phils put forth that day, because he was breaking from a difficult post position, number 12 in a 14-horse field, was wide around the first turn, tried to make a move while also going wide around the far turn. And he just flattened out at the end of that race in his first attempt, going beyond 6 furlongs. I thought it was a pretty good attempt in his first route. He went the same distance next time out in the slop at Churchill Downs in the street sense, and I thought he handled the distance much better that day. And he did not get a perfect trip in that street sense by any means. Heading into the clubhouse turn, he got badly sawed off in traffic, was steadied heading into that clubhouse turn, had to angle back inside, take plenty of sloppy kickback in his face down the backstretch. But once his rider, Jareth Loveberry, moved him to the outside, he inhaled the leaders and went on to a pretty impressive victory, despite kind of flip-flopping between his right and left leads in the stretch. I think this horse still has upwards to go. He still has shown a little bit of greenness in his races, but his speed figures have been ascending. The 101 that he earned last time out, I think he can take another step forward off of that. And while he does have tactical speed, he's not a runner that has to be on the lead, so I think he could work out the right kind of trip stalking on the outside in this Lecomte. And that leads me right into my top picks for this race, and I'm going to go with that number 8, Two Phils. I just like the progression that he showed in his races leading up to this 3-year-old debut, and I think he's going to get the right kind of trip, and the price should be fair enough on Two Phils. I do have that likely favorite, the number 7, Instant Coffee, as my second pick. I think he is very much the horse to beat in this Lecomte. The other Brad Cox trainer is fourth, and I do have confidence game the number 4 in there. I think he's one for Keith DeSolmer that could take another step forward and will appreciate this distance, but he'll be a slightly bigger price in this race. But it's going to be Two Phils for me in the Lecomte Stakes on Saturday at Fairgrounds. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.